a great question. So when you said help with medical expenses, are we talking about wage employees, or we're talking about just want to make sure I do the population? But even if we talk about all the populations, for classified faculty, the state has a ton of resources for assistance with medical bills and things like that. And so with wage employees, the city has RVA Strong. They have a really active website that gives tons, just so many resources. And we're happy to talk through and guide you to any of those resources. The client partners, the HR client partners have so much information and access, and so do I. Just managers or our staff members, just please reach out. We can help walk you through or find the answer to your question related to if there's some challenges there with costs, et cetera.
Can employees share bill hours with one another?
No, the state, there's no sharing of bill. Yeah. Because that's the state gave you that, just like it's equivalent almost like to sick leave. Parameters around that. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Bridget, this might be one for you. Could you walk through on the new parking deck entry and exit procedures?
Yes, absolutely. So the parking deck automation is about complete, and it will be scan entry for staff and for members. And the members already have barcoded cards. Staff will be issued their barcodes to either stick on your parking pass, or you could stick it on your badge or wherever you would like, so you can scan in some of the touchless entry. It will be pay on exit for visitors that do need to pay, and that will be credit card only, so it's much lower touch. If people need to pay cash, we can take it at the visitor services desk, and there will be signage to let folks know. So any state vehicles, staff vehicles that pay to park in the deck, you'll get a barcode soon.
Alan, I think as soon as you've tagged a question that you'd like to answer regarding housekeeping and their wages and salaries. You're still muted, Alex. Alex, you're still muted.
I was told to mute, so I try to follow the rules. For Nicole, for all of the ones that are in the VMFA reform demand list, why don't we group those all together and maybe deal with things that are reopening focused first, because there are a number of questions that I tagged as we'll answer live as part of those questions.
Sure thing. Let me just scan through really quick. Oh, here's one. Kimberly, could you walk us through again the process for telework agreements? And I think there's a little bit of confusion here about needing a form for face.
Yeah, well, DHR, there's always been a form for the state. The state has a form for everything. And so it's a telework form that's actually, HR has it. I believe it's even on SharePoint. All of those forms are out there. We're happy to give that to anyone that asks. But basically, it's very simple, seriously, process, because we want to be flexible. In phase 3, we need a telework form on file that just says that this is how, this person is requesting to work during this time. And a lot of it, obviously, is COVID related. But there may be other situations where a person is asking for a telework, and so that's why this form is very specific in the way that it asks questions. And managers and the HR client partner can help make that determination. So it's an interactive process between the manager and the person requesting the telework. I hope I answered that. So the signatures, I think there's a couple of signatures needed on the form, if not, if I remember correctly.
Should employees initiate that process with their managers before July 1st?
Well, we're saying July 1st, but we want to be flexible because we have reopening. So, I don't want everyone to get bogged down in paperwork because of telework the way that you're working now. So you've already been approved to work the way that you're working now. If there's something that's being enhanced or this is new for you, certainly we want you to get it done. But I think the way that the governor and the way that the press conferences are rolling out is just like week to week to week, and we're all not given a lot of lead time with anything. So normally they can sometimes give you up to 3 to 6 months to a year to make sure that you comply, but not in this case. I think they just wanted to, we wanted to make sure we put a date out there that's reflective of DHRM, the Department of Human Resource Management, but we are flexible with that July 1 date. We just want to make sure that people do get it done.
Well, the Q&A from this morning, the posters shared anywhere, I would say so. We have a spreadsheet that has all the questions and answers on there, so we will be sending that out. I have not received any member cards with barcodes. When were they sent or will be sent? I believe that's coming out in the next couple of days, right, Bridget?
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Most have already been sent out. You can give visitor services a call or shoot them an email to see if you can get a new barcoded membership card. And staff really should be doing the staff payroll deduction for parking, not membership. So you can reach out to me or to Emma Crank about that. You can certainly reach out to visitor services or Christine in membership about the cards. They can send you a digital card too that you can use on a smartphone if you would like.
Will there be dedicated entrance/exit locations for Pollard Center, 301 Building, Studio School, or the Robinson House? Because of their size, we didn't plan for anything like that.
I think it's not. Oh, I'm sorry, Nicole.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, it's just like a Grove employee access where it's still two-way, but we just ask that everybody be really conscious of their coworkers when they're coming in and out. Do foundation employees have access to something comparable to the employee assistance programs available to state employees?
Yes, through their benefits plan, they have an employee assistance program through the benefits. And we're happy to send, if the team needs for us to send that to them, we're happy to provide that set of that. But it should be in their, if they log into, they should be able to see all that, but we'll send that so it's readily available.
Can you walk us through the procedures that will go into effect if an employee gets sick with a suspected case of COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you say suspected, so they have not tested positive. If we
were to get sick, but
yeah, they're actually two different procedures. Yeah, I know that's what everyone struggles with, and I try to keep it as succinct and because it's almost like just a check-off list, and I know that sounds a little cold, but that's the way that the Virginia Department of Health looks at it, the things that we must do. If there's a suspected case of COVID, the first thing the manager, if someone reports that they're not feeling well, the manager should call HR immediately. We talk to the employee and we ask them a series of questions. We also ask them, would they be willing to get a test? And most employees say yes right away, and they're looking for a testing center. And so we give that information as well, from Better Med to CVS, Patient First. There are also free sites around town that's also on the RVA Strong for the City of Richmond's website. So there are places everywhere to get tests. And so once that's done, and we do ask the employee if they would share that result with us, so we know if it's positive or negative. And then what happens after that, we do what we call is contact tracing of we work with the employee to identify populations of people that they have interacted with if they're not feeling well, the way that contact tracing works, and for those of you that may or may not know, I went through the certification program at Johns Hopkins to be a certified tracer. And so from the moment you start feeling bad, you actually count 2 days before that. That starts your infectious period, and before that is the incubation period. So there could be a period of even 7 to 10 days, even before you got sick, that you may have been incubating the virus. So we try to look back, not just those 2 days, but I like to look back an additional 3 to 5 days, even with that, just as a buffer to see what contact that a person has had with staff. And then once we get that information, we immediately start calling those individuals. We just start calling. We let the division heads know. We let Alex know. And we still keep the employee's name private because we're required to do that. So we call that person a contact. And if a person does test positive, they're called a case, so that we don't say the individual's name. That's the standard procedure, and that has to do with HIPAA laws and privacy laws in the country. So we need to be very careful if we're thinking that someone may be that person. We just don't want to do that. We just want to stay very methodical. We found that this works really well. We've had 2 to 3 different scares. I'm going to say about 3 scares, and we've done great contact tracing with the help of that individual or individuals, and working within the department manager and the director and the division head. And we send people for testing. Once we get the test back from those contacts, we let the individuals that were infected, the individuals that may have been exposed to the infection, know right away that this person or persons have tested negative. And so far, thankfully, that's what has occurred. We've had all negatives except for that initial positive case we had at the very beginning. I'm sorry.
We're very lucky to have had only one person get sick with the COVID-19 virus. I mean, that's pretty incredible given the 700 plus people that work at the museum. And so we should be thanking our lucky stars. And that person recovered completely and was back to work after the doctors cleared them.
Right. And you know, we've studied, and I'm sure everybody is keeping up with this, you know, that we don't know how the virus actually evolves, or some people are asymptomatic and they walk around, they have no symptoms at all, and they just don't know. And so that's why wearing a mask is so important. I have to say this over and over and over, and I know Be Well is everybody's like, yes, please say this. Because the part of this, when we talk to employees that may have been exposed, the one thing, and they're very honest with us, they say, you know what, I have my mask, I've been wearing it sometimes, but I don't wear it all the time. And they know in their hearts, like, man, I should have had that mask on, you know. And so I understand it's hot. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable. We're not used to it. And it's just something that we have to do. You know, Be Well talked about taking frequent breaks, or getting out and, you know, getting some fresh air, you know, where you're by yourself outside, you know, and also keeping your desk area and, you know, your laptop, phones, and things like that properly wiped down. All that adds to just what I call that routine that you just have to do over and over. Because at some point, that mask restriction will go away. And, you know, I would still encourage everyone to still wear it, you know. But, you know, I understand that I can't make people, because some people may have medical reasons why they can't do it, and we have some additional options like a face shield. But if you wear a face shield, you may also want to wear gloves, because what they find is, you know, if you want to touch your eye, you'll go up under the shield and touch your eye, versus somebody that has just that mask on that kind of stops you from touching your mouth area. So you just want to be cognizant of other, what we call personal protective equipment that can help.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question here about whether or not there are any essential staff in the Be Well committee. Yes, there are. We have visitor services, ENG, exhibition designers had to come in to set up Sunken Cities as well as art handling, security, food services, the shop, and other visitor services, and other security, and other food service. We had hoped to expand with more people. The furlough occurred, and unfortunately, we couldn't ask people to work on Zillow if they weren't, receiving pay for the museum. If you have interest in being involved now, I ask you to please reach out to us, and that goes for VMFA Engaged as well. I will be following up in July with some information about joining VMFA Engaged. We are amending our bylaws to make it more accessible, and we really hope that we get a lot of participation, so keep your eye out for that communication.
So, Nicole, we probably should go to some of these questions around the VMFA reform. I know we may have other questions. And as I said, we're happy to stay online and answer all the questions that you have. We're not going anywhere. We want you to be informed. We want you to be comfortable, and we want you to know what we're doing. So I'll turn it back to Nicole. Do you have a place you want to start in terms of questions?
Let me see. Where's a good spot to start? There's a lot of questions around the release of the gallery associates and the reasoning behind that, and the timing behind that. If you guys want to comment.
Yeah, let me start off first by going back to the beginning of March when we planned we would be closed for 2 weeks. Then we thought we'd be closed until April 24th. Then we thought we'd be open again on June the 11th. And now we're focused on July the 1st and July the 4th for the general public. We've been wrong 3 times. I'm hoping that this 4th time we're going to get it right. There is no playbook for what we've endured, what we're continuing to endure. I mean, there's the pandemic. There are all of the things around the monuments throughout Richmond, throughout Virginia, and throughout this country, the social unrest, and then the economy. So, we have many times made plans and then had to change them. And we've also had to be reactive to the governor and the Secretary of Health as they have given us guidelines, which also have changed. And so we've had to be responsive. Our original plan had been with furloughing the 221 people, which we weren't actually going to do originally because we're self-insured. But we were asked by literally dozens of employees, why can't you lay me off? Why can't you furlough me? Because I'd be eligible for unemployment in that $600 a week CARES Act supplement. And when we heard what our employees were asking, we looked at the financial side of it, and to us as the institution, it was all the same. Now, in a big picture scheme of things, we have more than 700 people on payroll. The 221 people that we furloughed were only part of our workforce, of our wage hour workforce. Everybody else has been kept on the payroll with the benefits and from that time that we started on March the 12th. And we will continue, obviously, as we reopen here on July the 1st to our members. And we do that because without our employees, we can't get the job done. And that's everybody from people that are housekeepers and security to conservators and people in membership. Everyone in the institution is valued and valuable. Now, as we were working to this new reopening date and looking at the 221 furloughed employees, what we came upon is the fact that the restrictions that the governor's office had put on not just us, but every institution, in terms of the numbers of people that we can accommodate at the museum, it became very clear that we had too many employees in the building for what the capacity was. So we had to do it according to state rules. And Kimberly can talk to the particulars of how we did that. But I have to say it was done ecumenically because we chose a date that said, this is based on seniority and tenure, and not on anything else. So, and with, again, state rules dictating how we had to do it, we couldn't extend furloughs. We had to release people. And by releasing people, we're hoping that we can then open those jobs back up again, get our former colleagues to reply after they've been released, and bring as many of them back as possible. That's what we're hoping. And as we proceed along past July 1, we're going to know more. And at this point in time, I have to say that we've been pretty responsive when you look across the Museum field. The layoffs, the furloughs, the massive cuts across the board from top to bottom have been horrendous. Worse in the big cities like New York and San Francisco, Chicago. But I can tell you, we're fortunate here because we've been undergirded by our foundation. Just to put it in perspective, in putting together the budget for next year that begins July 1, the foundation put up $1.8 million of additional money from reserves so that we could keep all of our employees employed. And that's the difference in the budget. Our budget is about 60-some% employment, wages, salaries, and benefits. And so that being the largest portion, that's where we needed the help. But they understand the value of our staff and how that makes it happen.
Alex, I think you said it best. What I would add is that on top of that is we really want to look at, take this opportunity to look at how we engage our gallery associates. They had many concerns and demands and, from their perspective. And I think we respected that. What I did not see is it coming the other way. As we look at this reform group, and I know Alex will answer more questions, I think it's important when we engage in constructive conversations and feedback, even when it's difficult and we know we may be right, it's still, the amount of civility and collegiality that we should give to each other, to forcibly, what I would call, obtain employee emails without anyone's permission and to distribute this type of email to everyone. It jeopardizes so many things. I've had so many employees reach out to me just totally upset by this. And so where these questions may come from, their experience or their perception, I don't think any of us were engaged in a way that we could really sit and really have what I would call a collegial exchange of what the core issues were in the specifics. And to be putting out misinformation is what I've heard from our employees as well. Our colleagues said some of them have actually responded back because they felt that they don't speak for me. I don't know who these people are. And some employees thought that we were actually, that this was part of us. And so there was a lot of just total, it's almost like a campaign of misinformation. But always, even within that, there's always some type of takeaways. What are the takeaways? And now what? That's always my question. Okay, what are our takeaways? And then now what? How can we help? How can we come to a common conversation that we can engage in path forward? And some of that may be very hard to hear, but we have to learn to talk to each other in that way. So, while we always will be respectful of employee comments and answer, please understand that that's a two-way street. You have to be willing to listen and hear what we have to say about things that our colleagues have worked very hard in putting together for the last 5 years. And so can we be better and do better? Absolutely. That's what we've been doing for 10 years. And to the 5, most of us have been here, 5 or 6 years. And so it's heartbreaking, actually. But we will answer whatever questions. I know Alex is, because it's in our chat room, and so we don't avoid that. I do think that, again, we just want to be respectful. And actually, the state has policies against the misuse of employee email and email addresses, and also has, when it comes to civility and conduct, the state has policies with that as well. So I just ask everyone to abide by those policies as a state employee.
Thank you for saying all that, Kimberly. And, I like to believe that the people who put together the VMFA reform and asking questions about racism and asking their questions about pay equity and things of that nature have the very best intentions in mind. And so do we. And let me just say that on these issues, and I'm going to talk about something here in just a moment, we are very proud of the record that we have. We've done a lot. We've done more than most institutions in this country. In fact, we get used as a model of performance in terms of equity and diversity, fairness, and the statistics so support it, and I'm going to give you a few here as well. On the other hand, have we done all that we can do? Absolutely not. Kimberly will talk in a minute about some of the things that we're going to do about working on diversity and working on issues in that arena by some things that had been in the budget for fiscal 20. They, because of budget pressures, didn't make it into the final budget, but they are already in the fiscal 21 budget. And they will have the ability to carry on the job that we've been doing to make sure that we're the most equitable, fair institution possible. So let me talk about a couple of those. Let's talk about racism. Let's talk about sexism and sexual harassment. We have a zero-tolerance policy, and we have a zero-tolerance practice for all kinds of harassment, racism, sexism, anything that puts people at a disadvantage on the basis of the color of their skin or their ethnic origin or anything else. And we have a record to stand on where we have had people who have been accused of sexual harassment or racism. We have acted quickly. We act fairly. And mind you, we also act in terms of privacy by the law. So we don't broadcast these things. And let me just say what's really important, because some of the things that were in the VMFA reform were not true, were never true. And so if we don't know if somebody's been harassed for any reason or has been subjected to, whether it's by visitors or other employees or by volunteers, we need to know that. The HR department will investigate it. It all comes to my office eventually, and I know where we've had these cases. And let's talk about white supremacy and racism. We've had a couple of cases. In one case with a long-term employee who was using racial epithets and making terrible commentary to other employees, both people of color and not. We investigated. We did a thorough job. We confronted the employee. That was an employee with more than 25 years at the museum. They quit before they could be fired. They were to be terminated because, as I say, we have zero tolerance. In cases of harassment for sexual harassment, we've investigated those, and in each case, people have either been reprimanded, have been relieved of their jobs, or have been suspended without pay for a couple of weeks or more. And we don't tolerate it, but we have to know. If you know something, tell your supervisor. Tell someone so that we can do our job. There are not cases of people hiding in the museum. You know, there was one comment about a sexual predator, and if there's something like that going on, that's the first time I've ever heard of that or seen that. But if it's real, we want to know about it because we're going to deal with it. And we're going to deal with things as fairly, as equitably as we can under the law as possible. You know, the question, too, that's been raised about equity of pay. We spend a lot of time The HR department uses outside sources, the co-op people in Washington, AAMD, AAM, to look at all of the positions in the museum so that we're equitable. We also then look at the Commonwealth of Virginia. We are a state agency. We also have foundation employees. But as a state agency, we look at, and the question, for example, about housekeepers, that we underpay our housekeepers. We pay our housekeepers on average 10% better than any of the other state agencies in Virginia. There are 100 agencies in the Commonwealth. Now, having said that, am I happy with 10% more? No. It should be a lot more. We've got great housekeeping staff. They do a fabulous job. And we're working on some additional things in terms of compensation for our housekeepers because they have done an amazing job during the last 3.5 months. So hold on to that thought. But, in terms of equity, we look at every position. When we look at equity, too, though, look across the museum landscape. Half of our senior management team, the leadership that we have here, are people of color. 40% of all of our managers, directors, and department heads, 40% are people of color. The predominant number of them are African American. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at other institutions, that's not true. Just read the news stories that come out 3 or 4 times a day. And the same, though, is reflected in our board. Our board of trustees, 28% African American. I don't know of another art museum, a general large art museum in America that has close. Guggenheim, just so you know, 25 trustees, 2 of whom are not white. They've been around a lot longer than us, and they have a lot more money than us. Plus, they're in New York City. You'd think they would focus on that. But where we start is with our strategic plan. So if you really want to see who we are, spend a moment, look at the plan. Look at how we're building the collection. 28% of all of the funds we spent in the last 5 years, or is it 38%, Michael, have been on African American art. 38%?
Yeah, and actually there was a question around that in terms of supporting Black and Native American artists. So yes, I mean, Valerie is leading the charge in terms of acquiring African American art. And for Native American art, we've added more than 200 works since 2015.
Thank you. We look at all of the pieces of pay equity as well. We have in our plan that we want to raise our base rate in the next couple of years to $15 an hour at a minimum. But we also want to make sure that we do it in concert with raising everybody's pay that are wage-hour people or are salaried people on an hourly rate. Because we don't want to start somebody as a new employee at a higher rate than somebody might be making as somebody who's already worked here. Those are the kinds of things that we're doing. Now, here's another example, because this was in the VMFA reform. Why do we take advantage of our part-time employees? Let me tell you the investment that we've made just in the last 5 years. We've moved at an average cost of $22,000 per employee, because that's the cost of benefits for a full-time employee. $22,000 a year, every year. We've moved 57 part-time people into full-time employment. And if you do the arithmetic, it's $1.2 million a year added to our costs on the bottom line. And that's this year, and that's next year, and it's all the years in the future. Because we believe to be able to be successful, having more part-timers be full-time is the best formula. Now, there are some people who are part-timers. They're retired. They have other jobs. They only want to work part-time. And we respect that. We don't want to force anybody to lose their job because we're going to make it full-time as opposed to part-time. So we value our part-time people who want to be part-time. But where people want to be full-time, and I hear it all the time, we've made the effort. 57's just in the last 5 years. If you look at the previous 5 years, it's almost as many. That means 100 of our colleagues have gone from part-time to full-time on a permanent basis because we're making the investment in us, in all of the people that work at the museum. That's how valuable they are. And we get the support of the trustee board. We get the support of the foundation board because they hear what we say and they understand how valuable each and every employee is to the museum. Nicole, do you want to?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions about hazard pay for frontline staff, or additional raises to compensate for lost time or increased work that may result in COVID-19.
You say lost time. Read the question. I'm sorry, Nicole.
So I have a question specifically about will housekeeping receive extra pay for their extra work, and then a couple of questions about whether or not hazard pay will be given.
Yeah, I think Alex just touched upon with housekeeping that Randall, Gary, and I, and Hussein are looking at additional pay for the housekeeping staff. Actually, Randall's been working on a structure for the last, before COVID hit. Actually, all of this was before COVID hit, right? That was in his business plan. And so he's planned this for a while. We were just looking for the funding, the budget. And so he's been very proactive in that. And so, but Alex just alluded to looking at how we reward our staff through recognition bonuses that we're looking to do for housekeeping, but also as we look at security, the console, and other, individuals that worked on site under these very, in the beginning, especially serious conditions. And so I think I asked that first part, but the second question, part of that question, I'm not really clear on. Is
hazard pay?
Yeah, no, I thought I answered that. Because hazard pay is actually, there's not really a terminology of hazard pay for the state. It's premium pay, or you can get interim, like some type of interim pay or premier pay. And I think that's what we're looking at as we look at what I'll call different tiers, similar to what Bridget and Michael did, and I believe Tony's looking in as well, as we look at this raise in the minimum rate to what Alex is talking about. We're trying to set ourselves up so that we are able to slot people into these at this $15 and plus hour in the next 2 years. So you have to build the structure for 2 years to get there. And so that's what we'll be doing. So whether it's called, we don't call it really hazard pay, it's more like premium pay or recognition bonus or pay.
Will senior leadership be taking pay reductions to support the prevention of further furloughs or layoffs?
We already have. Everybody on the senior management leadership team, the 8 of us you see on the screen, actually did it earlier. We did it before there was coronavirus because the budget for fiscal 20 wasn't balancing. And so we decided, as everybody remembers, there was a 5% pay increase. We decided to turn our 5% pay increases back for all of us, individually and collectively, so that we could keep other employees on the payroll and keep the museum running in the right direction. Now, we don't know what's going to happen when the General Assembly comes back in August. So there is the possibility of further pay cuts, but we'll start at the top. We certainly won't start at the bottom. And when we look at what the General Assembly and the governor come back to us that we expect cuts, we suspect, we'll see how we can best deal with them. And we'll deal with it equitably. But I'm proud that the management team stepped forward because it was not a small amount of money to be able to help the greater cause.
Is there any plan that you can comment on for future conversion of wage staff to full-time?
We have that all in the budget again this year. And there was a comment that someone asking about, are you proud about the 57 that you converted? That's $1.2 million of additional cost. I'm not sure how best to describe how much money that is, but that's $1.2 million spread between nearly 60 people with benefits. That's real money. And then there were probably close to 50 plus in the previous 5 years. 100 conversions of part-time to full-time employees is something I'm very proud of. And I know that the 100 people who are benefiting from it today are probably equally proud that we've done that for them and all of our colleagues.
Alex, may I also add that I want to thank all of our frontline managers and directors that have worked on these conversions and business plans, because they've worked very hard on business plans on the last 3 to 4 years. Hossein and I have asked, okay, what's your strategy? How do you see your job growth? It's true workforce planning. And I want to thank all those managers that and division heads that created all of these new positions. If you really think about how many position descriptions that you kicked out for these new positions, I think we stopped at 57 because of COVID, but I think we were in line there was even 3 to 4 or 5 more. I think HR was telling me, Gil was saying that we were set to do. So we probably would have been closer to the 60 mark had we not had the COVID hit. But I did want to take this time to thank all of our frontline leadership for that. We could have never done that without their insight and input.
And we have more coming. Our goal, we have a goal, is to convert everybody from part-time to full-time that wants to be converted, because we know it would be better for everybody.
Yeah, and our budget team, I want to thank all of them, from Hazel to Connor, Leon, everyone that worked on that as well.
I have a question about cafe staff and their pay rate being $8 an hour, with the assumption that there would be tips. Will there be any adjustment to compensate for potentially smaller crowds that would result in fewer tips?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know Michael and I have been talking about that with our food service leadership. Michael,
yeah, I mean, I can answer a little bit of that. I mean, if an employee has a multiple position number, we can certainly use a position number for cafe staff instead of barista during this time period till the end of December, and just offer some flexibility. So the answer is yes. We would just have to work with your manager to make sure that everybody's on the same page with what button you're pushing, what position you're working that day, and obviously they need to schedule you for those shifts.
Great, thanks, Mike.
Similarly, if we have fewer patrons in the food service areas than we were anticipating or hoping for, will hours be cut, or will shifts be maintained?
Just like if we weren't in a pandemic, we're always going to schedule for business needs. So that's why we're being really, really careful and phasing in staff right now to ensure that we're not going to bring back a lot of employees who are not going to have work and then, really not benefit from, coming back to work and not having those hours there. So we're trying to do it extremely carefully and working with the food service managers to make sure that we are doing it in a cautious, phased approach.
Michael, do you want to mention VMFA to go as well, a new venture?
Sure. We're looking for additional revenue opportunities, and we hope to start a curbside program called VMFA to go August 14th. Hopefully that'll be our launch date. We've delayed it a couple of times for a number of reasons, but this will also provide additional opportunities for hours and some revenue capture.
Yeah, I want to thank all those teams, Jan and her marketing team, for when we thought we were going to try to launch earlier, but so many circumstances around. I mean, you all see from week to week between the mayor and the governor, we're not sure what's happening when, and so, but we still, we're really, really excited about this, and that also creates opportunity of work as well for our workers. So.
Do we have any ETA on when the hiring freeze is expected to end?
Oh. Alex, do you? Because I'm not.
Well, we sail the way the governor tells us to sail. We don't know. There are exclusions to the hiring freeze. So we are pretty crafty and inventive about how we can get around those things, because they're obviously critical areas that we can't do without. And so I'm never hesitant to go down to the Secretary of Education and make our claim why these are central positions. And so far, we're actually batting 1,000. So although there was a hiring freeze, we will continue to do what we can do so that people aren't having to double up on responsibilities or things are not getting done.
Right. And that's where that additional pay, so that's why I thought those questions were really good and timely. Not just about hazard pay, but premium pay, and trying to get bonuses, recognition bonus for all the just round-the-clock work we've seen done. Alex will go to bat, and I've seen him go to bat for us, and so I don't anticipate any issues there either.
We have a question asking why the Reform VMFA group has not been addressed publicly, or if we have any plans to address that publicly.
No, we don't plan on addressing it publicly. First of all, our largest group of interested people would be the people inside the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts employee base, so all of us. And we are doing our best is addressing that. That's why we're having these town halls. We plan on doing more. But addressing anonymous Instagram posts and demands in a public forum is not advisable. This is something that we've gotten from council, that we brought on from the Martin Agency and other places that are volunteering their time to help us be able to answer these questions and look at the real substance to them, to see where have we not done enough, where do we need to do more. And quite frankly, I'd rather stand on our record, all the good things that we have done, of which there are many, all the things that we are planning to do as we move into fiscal 21, again, of which there are many. And then all of the things that we're taking as ideas from staff now, from the VMFA reform, to be able to make our institution better for our employees, better for the community in Richmond and across Virginia that we serve. But doing it in a public forum, no. We don't get into that kind of arena.
Nicole, I'm sorry. You know what? I forgot to finish that second part of the question with diversity and inclusivity.
I was just about to say there's a couple of questions asking about the potential for a protected forum for dialogue surrounding these issues and what kinds of measures we're going to put in place for diversity and inclusion.
Kimberly's got some great plans that were actually in the fiscal 20 budget, didn't make it through, and are in the 21 budget with some pretty important improvements around the issues of diversity, around the ways that we deal with all the issues of inherent bias. So tell us about those things, Kimberly.
Yeah, I want to start by saying that first we had to work on the culture within the institution. When I first got here, with a lot of employee angst and expression of their concerns built just around the organizational capacity and structure. So we did a lot of work on that for the last 3 to 4 years. And now we're in such, what I mean by that is like just what I would call frontline diversity initiatives, like our recruitment, how we do search committees, how we engage with our communities. I've partnered with Stephen. Stephen has done a phenomenal job in partnering with our HBCU organizations and universities, and he and I and Caprice have done a lot of work even this past year and participating in career development and intern programs to bring more awareness of VMFA and putting us out in that space. It's about relationship. It's about network. And I think that we have done incredibly well with that, and students are always happy to see us. They are always happy to talk to Stephen and exchange a really great conversation with him. So now the word has gotten around to HBCUs, and they look for us to be at their career and job fairs. So that's like a beginning from a community perspective. But things that we're going to do, what Alex is referring to, is we're hiring a chief diversity officer. I'm really, really excited about that. That will also be another senior HR person working on workforce development, diversity, equity, and inclusivity, because all of it goes together, how you manage conversations and continuing to build the culture of openness and respect and awareness of each other and civility as well. And so that's first and foremost. We're also going to have a company called Paradigm that's going to come in and work with some frontline workshops and webinars in this coming year. As soon as we get a little bit past reopening and people take a breath, we're diving right into that, along with other plans for speaker series and organizations to come through. I want to also point out the work that we've been doing with in our disability workforce. We've had the Virginia. We've joined the Virginia Ability Board, which helps connect us to individuals that have physical, intellectual differences and capabilities. And so we're so happy to start to even branch out more in those communities. But those are just some of the things, building a community of resources for us so we can have conversations and have experts to come in and help us do this work. But the Chief Diversity Officer is that pinnacle position that will help, direct all that work.
Kimberly, I want to follow up on the topic of disabilities. That was one of the other hire more employees with disabilities, increase accommodations. And maybe some of our colleagues missed last October when we had the disability fair. We had almost 20 employers. We had some 400 people come to the job fair, and it was called the Ability Fair, but it was aimed at people with the whole gamut of disabilities, and to, one, improve our workforce so that we can employ more people with disabilities and challenges of every kind. And we were the first museum of any kind in America to ever do such a thing. And we had all the biggest employers at the table. We were there. And I think that's something we should all be very proud of because we are promoting an agenda of diversity, in this case, people with disabilities, so that we can include everyone. Our definition of audience, and this would apply to employees, our definition of audience is everyone. Every one of the 8.4 million Virginians, and anybody lucky enough to wander into Richmond and be close enough to come visit. And that applies in how we look at employees and volunteers, everything across the board, because being equitable and inclusive is the bottom line for us on everything.
I had a question here somewhere that I wanted to see the specific wording that was asking about repatriation and provenance of pieces in our collection and how that's going to be addressed.
And Michael handled that, but let me just say that when it comes to again being leaders in the field, the business of Nazi war loot, the section in the museum Bible of museum registration was written by one of our registrars. We're constantly contacted as a model agency of what should be done with repatriation. And I'll just give you one example of something we're working on that most everybody would know, of objects we know are stolen. They were stolen in the 1890s by British troops who invaded the Kingdom of Benin, who stripped the palaces of bronzes, Benin bronzes, some of which were 200 and 300 and 400 years old. We have about 3 of those in our collection, and we're in conversation to create a forum whereby, in working with our colleagues in the Benin Kingdom, that those things can either be repatriated or, more importantly, might be able to stay in place so that we can show and illustrate the unbelievably beautiful works of art but doing it in such a way that compensates and partners with our colleagues in West Africa. But those are the kinds of things you know we do all the time. Michael is going to actually touch on a couple of other examples as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and it's something that we think about every day. This effort is largely led by Karen Daly in registration, and what we strive to do is to understand the provenance of all the works in our collection, which basically means who owned them, and did the people have the right to own them? Were they stolen? There is an art loss registry that we check so that none of the works in our collection are on there. We post everything on our website. We have an open access policy that the museum, through a staff-led initiative, has really subscribed to. And since 2004, we have returned 6 works of art, 3 of which were Native American objects that were returned to the Tlingit tribe of Alaska, and 3 of them were European paintings that were stolen by the Nazis from Jewish collectors, and their heirs contacted us and said, we think that this work is actually our family's, and we did our due diligence and returned them. In terms of African art, we are actively searching for a curator of African art. Richard Woodward retired after more than 40 years of service last year, and we were in the middle of that search when the museum closed with COVID-19. We will reopen that search when we reopen and it's safe to bring candidates on site. And that curator's first task will be to review that collection of more than 1,200 works. And as Alex said, if things are not clean, if things are not ours by right, we have to return them. And we have a solid commitment on that. This question came up this morning, and Stephen pointed out that we have a very good tab on our collections page that Courtney Morano did, so you can read about provenance. But it's one of the most serious things we do. We do not want to be a museum that has stolen property on view.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions that have come in that are more on the COVID side again.
I feel like I should get a PhD now or something. Somebody should. But I'm happy to answer what I can.
I see, Michael, you have 2 tags here regarding whether or not, Michael Barr, not Michael Taylor, whether or not any special events are currently on the schedule, and what the plan is for Jazz Night on Thursdays and happy hour on Fridays.
So we're temporarily pausing Jazz Night and the happy hour pricing just because of our capacity protocols. The marketing department and the performing arts department and education are working to take jazz virtual. So they should be, providing us with information on that as soon as they can. And for special events, as you all saw in the Be Well presentation, a lot of the spaces that we traditionally do special events in are going to be used for additional staff break rooms, especially for the month of July. So right now we have a couple of small internal events in July, but not really any other events, as our capacity protocols are, again, only allowing us to do the smaller events. For 50, phase 2, and then for phase 3, 250. So I really think that for the calendar, for the most part, events would start back up in later August and September, I think.
Thank you. We have a question about whether or not any visitors who do not adhere to the new COVID safety rules will be allowed to remain on the premises, or what the response to that would be.
Not at all. We're gonna be absolutely tough about this. I'm going to be there next Wednesday morning when the members come. I'll be there for the 4th when we open to the general public. And we're going to not allow people in that are not going to wear a face mask. The only 2 exclusions are children under 2, and then people who have a medical reason. And they'll be given a little sticker to put on to be able to allow our security and gallery associates and others to know that they're not wearing a mask to be intolerant of everybody, but if they have a medical reason. And I want to remind everybody, if anybody has a problem, that this is about you. This is about your mother, your grandmother, your cousins. It's not about me. It's about protecting everyone. And as we've seen the spike in Texas and Florida and places with beaches where they're not respecting the physical distancing, where they're not respecting by wearing face masks, it's unimaginable. But we will not allow folks, and we're going to just say simply, we're sorry. At some point in time, if we don't require them, we hope you come back then. Now, we've had a number of people, less so on the face mask part, but on the business of Kahindi Wiley and in our support of Black Lives Matter, quit, say they're not going to give us money to be members. We expect fully that there will be people who will try to challenge it, but we're going to be as nice as possible. And going back to a question that we had this morning, if you're in the galleries or you're at the front desk and someone becomes belligerent, takes off their face mask or does anything that makes you uncomfortable, call a supervisor. Step away. Don't put yourself in the line of fire and risk your own health. Just step away. Let someone else handle it. Need be, I'll come and talk to folks, and I'll be glad to escort people out if necessary. But we're doing this for everybody's health and safety.
Thank you. I have a question about the museum hours and the necessity for the museum to be open until 9 o'clock when events are not taking place. And if we, how that decision was came to.
We made the decision to just return to our normal hours, not because of the events, which are really there to generate attendance. After 3.5 months of being closed, we suspect there are a lot of people with pent-up enthusiasm to come to the museum. But we also, when I go back to the issue of audience, most of us, obviously all of us, are working. And if we weren't working at the museum, 10 to 5 doesn't cut it, except on the weekends. Weekends are busy for folks. And to not have evening hours means that we're eliminating the opportunity for our public to come visit. I mean, the whole idea and the reason that we offer such great hours, the best hours of any art museum in America, and the reason we offer free general admission 365 days a year is all about being accessible. Being accessible physically, being accessible intellectually, being accessible in terms of availability, because it makes us available for everyone. No one has an excuse because it costs too much to come in. No one has an excuse because you're only open during the day. The National Gallery of Art, fine museum, has no evening hours. On a per capita basis, we outdraw them in terms of attendance about 2.5 times to 1. And that's because we offer great hours so that people can come when they are available. We have to remember, we're all public servants. We're here to serve the community of Richmond and the greater Richmond area and all of Virginia. That's what we do. And I take great pride in the fact that we do it extremely well and do it with a smile, which is one of the reasons that we are so popular.
Thank you. As state employees, can the governor mandate testing for all state employees who return to their agency?
Sure, he could. He has not done so yet. We would love the governor to mandate it and then fund it. I'll tell you one, going back to pay equity, here's an important tidbit that I want to add to that previous conversation. Last year, when we were putting together the budget for fiscal 20, the governor increased pay, as I mentioned before, by 5%, up to 5% for all eligible employees. Well, as I mentioned, we have some 700 plus employees. Well, the mandate and the funding only covered 230 employees. All right, that meant 500 employees were not eligible, according to the governor, for a raise. All of our part-time employees, all the employees who were not general employees. So the vast majority, 2/3 of all of our employees, were not eligible for that raise. Well, guess what? We found $750,000 of funding that paid those raises for everybody. Foundation employees, state employees, part-time employees, full-time employees. Anybody who was eligible for the criteria that DHRN set down, we thought it was important that equity and fairness was observed first and foremost. And that $750,000, by the way, isn't just in fiscal 20. It's every year moving forward. We added that to the bottom line in terms of cost because, again, we want to be fair and we want to make sure that our employees benefit the best way possible and not have classes of employees who are us and them.
Thank you. We have 2 questions about contact tracing within the museum. If the case is positive, will the public be notified of their own potential exposure? And what will happen to people who are potentially exposed at our institution? Will they be required to take time off?
Yes. So the answer is yes to both of those, and you have to, the CDC and Virginia Department of Health. The Virginia Department of Health would actually work with that individual and those individuals that test positive for 14-day quarantine. And then after the quarantine, you have to have the BDH likes to see where you have no more temperature for 3 days, and then they advise you to take one other test to show that you are now negative. If it does come back positive again, they ask you to do another 14 days, actually. And I've heard from other HR, from other organizations that have had that happen. So you do have to do the quarantine period, yes.
Are there any resources for frontline employees on de-escalation should conflicts with patrons arise regarding wearing masks or maintaining physical distance?
I think Alex just answered that in part, but
we're going to, our frontline employees, whether they're visitor services or people as gallery associates, should call the supervisors. We will call security. Security is going to be our final line before we ask people to leave. And I'll go back to the business of discrimination where we had cases, a couple of cases 2 years ago when we had the Congo mask exhibition. And we had two patrons that came and abused our employees. Again, we got zero tolerance for that kind of thing. We don't allow it, and we make sure that we deal with it. So in the case of people, and whether it's the mask issue or anything else, we have a protocol set up. Security will be ready. And quite frankly, people are not going to have a choice. They have to wear a mask or they will be asked to leave. If they refuse, they will be escorted. If I have to come down from my office to help out, I'll do it. Because I want to remind people again, it's about everybody else. It's not about you. And it's about making sure that we can have the safest environment possible.
Yeah, and just to add additional thought to that as well, that John Coven and I have talked about, we have contract security as well, depending on if we need them or not as backup. Plus, John has been in contact with Richmond Police Department and the Virginia State Police since we're a state agency, if there are tons of people that are trying to get in and they don't have masks on, we are working with our local law enforcement partners as well.
And Kimberly, I don't think we're going to have a problem. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that people that love the museum or are going to be coming to the museum are going to respect us. We worried when the governor several years ago decided to ban all firearms from state buildings, state executive buildings like ours. We've not had a single incident since then, not one, of of somebody trying to do open carry coming into the building. And by the way, someone asked, the question was asked in the VMFA reform about concealed weapons. No weapons are allowed. The only people who can have any firearms in our building are our police officers or other members of a police jurisdiction if they're coming to the museum on business. We don't allow any kind of firearms. And someone said, "Well, we need to disarm our police department." Let me tell you, I am so opposed to firearms of any kind. I don't own one. I've never owned one. I'm never going to own one. The only people that should own firearms are the police and the military. And everyone else that wants to hunt, that would be a good exception to the rule, but only for hunting purposes, target things. People don't need to come into public buildings like art museums. But would we disarm? No. We have a responsibility to our community, to our staff, to our volunteers, to our visitors, to protect them the best way possible. And I can tell you, the number one deterrent, and this has been proven over and over again by security experts that look at art museums in particular, because unlike other museums, we almost all have armed security forces. They're a deterrent because the bad guys see that this isn't an easy place to create mayhem. So we do it for everybody's safety and security. It's effective, and I hope it continues to be 100% effective for the future.
We had a follow-up question to the contact tracing questions, asking specifically how the public would be notified if there was a positive case in the museum.
Well, we would notify that through our, and I'm sure maybe Jan might want to respond to that as well, but we put that on our website for public view. Now, I'm sure there's, maybe Jan might want to weigh in on.
So basically, if we receive any questions regarding that, when we did have the one positive case, we got contacted by several different media outlets, and we responded to all of them and told them our process. And of course, we cannot release any names, but we have a pretty thorough process with notifying folks once a case is confirmed positive.
Great. Thank you. In the event of the second wave, do you think we'll stay open if there is a second wave of COVID? And if not, how would we, would the cell be available at that time? How would we help partners and timers navigate that?
Well, let me just say my crystal ball doesn't see that well anymore. It's a little cloudy. Obviously, we can all hope and pray that there isn't a second wave. So far, Virginia has been very fortunate. And we're going to do everything we can do, as we have and demonstrated over the last nearly 4 months, to keep everybody employed and with benefits. And again, when you look across the landscape of art museums in the United States today, and there was another wave of layoffs and terminations in a half a dozen museums just today. And, I can't understand how they're doing it or why they're doing it. We understand the value, and I hope that we can avoid that at all costs, because it's all of you as employees that make the difference. And that's why we continue to invest in every way possible, and whether it's with training or conversions to full-time jobs, increased pay and benefits, all of those things. We spend $28 million a year on our staff in direct costs that go directly to all of us. To everybody, the 700-odd people, that is money, whether it's pay or benefits, in the pockets of our employees. And as I say, that's the largest single piece of our budget. It's almost 2/3 of everything we have. And I'll also tell you, the Commonwealth's appropriation this year is only $11 million. So if you do the arithmetic, there's $17 million between the appropriation and just payroll. And the operating budget for this year is $48 million. So there's another $20 million on top of it that Tom and all of our dedicated fundraisers, Christine in our membership office, Michael and all of his people in the enterprise areas, we generate revenues. We do everything we can do to maximize. And we've got great news on the fundraising front, where we expected to see a drop in contributions by some 15% in the quarter that we were closed or have been closed. We've actually seen an increase above the original budget by more than $250,000. What that portends to be, if it continues, is that it could be $1 million positive swing for the fiscal 21 budget. Now, we're not going to make any changes to the budget. So what we're going to do is hold that in our back pocket, because if it materializes, and then come August, if the General Assembly come in and recommends to the governor a revised budget that calls for budget cuts, then we'll be prepared. We have got a couple of other pockets, but I want to sing the praises of our two boards, because they've stepped up to the plate for this quarter and for next fiscal year with $3 million of additional funding. And I can tell you that all of that money is basically payroll and benefits for all of our employees, nothing else, because everything else is covered by that $11 million appropriation. And I think it demonstrates what we do for our employees. Now, having said that, we know we need to do more. Oh my gosh, we need to do so much more. There are more benefits. There are more people we need to convert to full time. There are more business to be done about equity, raising the minimum rates to $15 an hour and then going from there. Those are the kinds of things we know are absolutely critical. And we're committed to doing it. We've been doing it. We're continuing to do it. And we welcome the ideas and the thoughts about what else we can do to make this really the best place possible to work.
Kimberly, I have a question that maybe operations would have some insight on regarding the Wi-Fi in relation to COVID. There are a lot of directives encouraging the public to use their cell phones to access information on site, but the Wi-Fi is not reliable. Those of us who have been here during the pandemic have not had consistent, reliable Wi-Fi access, even though we're under the building's capacity. Will something be done about the Wi-Fi so the public can successfully use their cell phones as directed?
Yes, that's an amazing question. and I'm new to the technology areas, but I can tell you that we are looking at that, and that has been one thing that will be addressed in this budget. Correct, Alex?
It's actually in the budget. Unfortunately, at the moment, as everybody is seeing how the states approach the budget, it was an additional $400,000 appropriation that has been put to the side until the General Assembly meets again in August. But there were a couple of things, one of which was expanding and creating greater intensity throughout the facilities, including the poly, of our Wi-Fi system. I was in a meeting yesterday afternoon, and I think I moved 3 times up in my office because the signal kept failing. And I tried getting on to wireless with my iPad to stay on this Zoom meeting, and that was even tougher. But it's something we know we have to do. We have in the budget. Hossein and Katie Payne, our head of government relations, did a fabulous job of getting that put in there. Unfortunately, it's not been taken out of the budget. It's just merely been put on the table until they see how the economy and, quite frankly, how much money might be coming to the state from the federal government if there's an additional version of the CARES Act that they enacted earlier this spring.
And that's so critical because the Wi-Fi boost and everything will be at the cornerstone of what it is we're really looking to do with technology just in general. In looking at our e-commerce portfolio to education, how we do our business and how we're going to grow. I know that's something that Caprice is also looking at, even within our strategic plan. She's asked these amazing questions and hypotheses on how we develop these longer-term strategies around technology, because it really is a core piece of where we need to be. We're not going to be able to get to where we need to be in 10 years unless we start doing that like right now. And so, as Alex indicated, it's tabled for now until they can make more decisions around it. So, from a budget perspective.
I have a question here about our security staff. Can you explain what our scope officers have guns? What kind of training do they get in firearm safety? What about de-escalation? At least in terms of school shootings, we have seen time and again that armed security guards are not effective.
Well, our police officers are special conservators of the police. There's a whole slate of minimum requirements in terms of training, firearm safety, marksmanship, and they go through a variety of other safety trainings on a regular basis. Most of our force, too, there are about 37 police officers, are former state police, Richmond police. They've been military police. John, who's our chief, had a career in the military and the police department. And so they have come to us, and that's why we hire people with this kind of experience, because safety is first and foremost. We want to be secure. We want to be safe. But, I think I already explained the issue of why guns. They are a visual deterrent for the really bad guys. And they're out there. We're fortunate that they don't come our way. I'm going to knock on wood that they don't come our way. But our people receive regular, consistent training and are prepared. In terms of de-escalation, again, our people have gone through tons of training. And I would say that when you look at what we've had in a few instances in the last 10 years, where the chief has had to step in, they've handled it very calmly and very successfully.
We had a question that I think was a follow-up to when we were commenting on the response to any patrons who don't want to adhere to our safety rules, such as wearing masks and the potential for contract security, asking if it's a good idea if RPD would be involved, or if you think that would be a bad idea. Can you clarify whether or not RPD would be involved in the situation?
No, they're not going to be involved unless there is, if we ask them to be involved. I mean, our scope officers are there to initiate that first point of contact. They're our first responders.
Only in the case of an arrest.
Correct.
And we've only had one arrest in 10 years, and that was a flagger who was refusing to leave the property of the museum with his flag. This was about 5 years ago. And we went to every extent possible to get him to understand. It took 45 minutes. We did call RPD, but it's because we don't have a booking facility, and we don't have a jail facility nor a way to run them into the court. So we have to call RPD to be able to take the folks down. Our officers went down in that one case, did the booking at the city courts, and then they were brought to trial and they were convicted. I wouldn't worry about this one because I just don't think it's going to come up. And the question about the police, that's a large societal question. But I want to remind everybody, we have our own police force. These are our colleagues. They're our fellow employees. They're there for our safety, for the safety of our visitors and our volunteers. They're there for the safety of the collection. We have billions of dollars of art. And don't kid yourself that there aren't bad people out there that know that and are looking for vulnerable spots. And we don't want to be one of them. But, our reliance on the police is our own people. And I have great faith in their ability to do a good job.
There are some questions regarding the petition again. The reform email we all got, is it a group of former and current employees, or is it just outside people complaining about VMFA? Are some of the complaints legitimate? And then a separate question asking if we're going to address the points of the petition.
Well, first of all, we've been addressing them, so maybe people joined us later haven't been listening as intently as I've been speaking. We've addressed most of them. I'll take a look at them here in just a second. But we're not, I've also said, we're not going to address these, the VMFA reform formally or in a public forum. Social media is what it is, and this is an anonymous petition with demands. It's impossible to negotiate with anonymity. We don't know if it's current employees, former employees, non-employees. We have no idea, nor do we, quite frankly, have any intention to find out, because it's immaterial. Now, having said, and I've said this before, there are a lot of great points in what the VMFA reform document says. We've addressed most of them. Some of them are great points. Some of them were born from misinformation or lack of information. And we're happy to continue providing the answers where we have not answered them, or there are voids or gaps. And then there are ideas of things that obviously should be improvements. There are things we're working on. And have we been perfect? Absolutely not. Can we be perfect? Probably not as well. But we're going to try. We want to make this the best place to work. We want to make the best place to visit. The basic tenets of equity and fairness are absolutely the cornerstone of who we are. The issues of harassment, racism, we have zero tolerance. A couple of people wrote in about, well, what kind of tolerance is it when you let people who are harassing people get off with a reprimand? Well, I know the details of every harassment case that's been brought to HR. Now, they haven't been brought to HR. We don't know about it. We can't deal with it. But I know, because I insist upon fairness for everybody. But, not everything is cut and dry when you hear innuendos and rumors about, person this did that and person this did that. You've all heard that there are always two sides to a story. And to be fair, you have to listen to all sides. More importantly, we go way deeper. In the case of the person who was accused of racial epithets, had worked at the museum for 20-some years, the HR department did an investigation that interviewed privately and confidentially a dozen different people that did or may have had interaction with this person to either validate or refute what had gone on. It was validated 100%. The person was going to be terminated. I mean, that's how deep they go. But, in cases where we have things that are not as clear, we have to act with the advice of counsel. We're a state agency, so we have to go to the Attorney General's office for counsel. And there are things we can do, and there are things we can't do. Now, there might be something that you, if you were the boss of your own business, would say, well, I don't want that person around here. Well, I have to tell you, that might actually be against the law to fire somebody under those circumstances. We can't do that. We're about fair, equitable, and we also have to be legal, because our general counsel, Cindy, doesn't allow us to be anything but. We comply with all those laws, and so things sometimes don't look quite right. The fact of the matter is, you have to trust Kimberly and all of her colleagues. They're doing all of the work, and that matter, John Coben and others who do the investigations, because we don't leave any stone unturned. We take every complaint seriously, and we deal with them the way they should be dealt with. And like my mother said, how would you want it to be done if it was you? And that's my yardstick on how we do it.
Thank you. We had a follow-up to our point about not being able to negotiate with the anonymous body in terms of VMFA reform. If any current employees are involved in the VMFA reform and come forward, can you guarantee there will not be consequences for them, that they will not be fired, that you will listen and respond?
Absolutely. Absolutely guarantee it. I put my word and my reputation on it, because if anybody has a concern, and any of the concerns that are in the demands, they're all real, or they may proceed as real, and we'll deal with them as whether real or perceived to be real, as honest and forthright. So, yeah, absolutely, we don't do retaliation. We don't do retribution. We don't do anything to discriminate an employee who wants to be heard. I mean, that's one of the baseline tenets of being a good employer. We want people to feel comfortable and safe at the museum, every way, shape, and form. So, sure. Now, being anonymous there's no way we can address these things. I don't even know what form we'd address it in, other than it was an email to me. I don't know where it came from or how many people it came from or where it was going. We don't do that. We don't do that whether it's this or any other. And we get lots of anonymous stuff. People call in saying, hey, I don't like the Kahini Wiley because it's a racist sculpture. If they don't tell us who they are, we can't respond. When we know, we actually pick up the phone. I can't tell you how many people I've called in the last 3 weeks who have accused me and us of causing all the mayhem on Monument Avenue. That by putting up the Kahini Wiley rumors of war, we've actually created the destruction of all of the Civil War monuments on Monument Avenue. Obviously, that's not the case. But I've talked to those folks. In some cases, they were angry. And I'm willing to listen to anybody. We're willing to sit down with anybody. So, yes, the easy answer is people are safe. We guarantee it. And I know Kimberly and all of our HR people. And we can also do it where if people don't want to be known to be bringing forth an issue, we can do that confidentially. We don't have to make anybody know that you're bringing up an issue. And it might be one that you have a fear for your personal safety. And we'll fear with you. And we'll make sure that we protect that.
Could you describe the ideal process that somebody might follow in order to begin a conversation like that? Like nuts and bolts. Who needs to be contacted first?
The first person I always encourage people to go to is your supervisor. You know, and if it's a sexual harassment complaint, racism, if it's any unsafe workplace situation, you know, go to your supervisor. If you don't feel like you're getting any response from your supervisor, and that's certainly possible, don't stop there. Go to your supervisor. You know, there are only so many tiers in our place. We may have a lot of employees, but we don't have that many layers. Eventually, though, you can also go confidentially to the HR department. And you can do that, and we can guarantee your anonymity, and we can deal with it. But if we don't know, we can't. You know, and as I say, when it comes to the kinds of complaints, some of which are in here, they all make it to my office. And I get a reading on whether they were adjudicated this way or that way. And I take seriously my responsibility that fairness is carried out. And a couple of times I've weighed in and said, well, you know, maybe we need to look at this a little more and do a little more because I think we need to ask a couple of other questions. You know, none of us are perfect, but we've done it. And I have to say that 100% of the outcomes that I have had on my desk in the last 5 years, last 10 years, I've been here 14 years. But certainly in the last 5 years since Kimberly and her crew have been on board, I'm 100% comfortable with as being fair and equitable and the right thing to do.
Nicole, may I also just add there, I agree with Alex. I've noticed in this feed that people are mentioning employee names. Just to let you know, we don't discuss personnel names or specifics for people. That is also a confidential matter and privacy. And you can also set yourself up for defamation. So we can't comment on specifics of, you know, using people's names. I've noticed that in the Q&A. I just want to remind individuals that are sending questions that we can't comment on specific people by their name.
We're past 5 now, so I just want to check in with y'all and see if you'd like to continue.
If we have any other questions, I don't want anybody to go home without feeling that we've been able to answer your questions and make you more comfortable. Our goal to, the earlier questions, how do you get answers? Ask them. We're transparent, we're honest and forthright, and we don't want anybody to be shortchanged in this forum. And we're going to continue to have forums because these are valuable. We value every employee that works at the museum, whether they're brand new or been at the museum for 56 years. And regardless of what their job is, every piece of the museum machinery, every one of us that makes up that complex network are invaluable. Because you start picking them away and things don't work. So I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions. I see we still have 85 people. So anybody who wants to stay on, don't be shy. Ask questions, and I hope we're answering them all to your satisfaction.
I have one for Michael Taylor. The majority of the collection sits in storage, so why not use that money for wages and salaries?
Yes, I'd be happy to answer that. So we are governed by the American Association of Museum Directors, the American Alliance of Museums, and there are strict guidelines about how you can and cannot use income from the sale of works of art. These have been under scrutiny lately, and if the opportunity did ever come, we would consider it. But right now, we are not considering selling the collection. The collection is the foundation and bedrock of this museum. It's why people come, and it's why they know VMFA around the world. So as tempting as it can be, I think we've got to hold firm on that. And part of the reason I say that is if museums had acted in this manner in the past, we've had crises before. We've had 9/11, we've had 2008, we've had 1987, and we've had the Wall Street crash in 1929. Then we would have sold all these collections over time, and visitors would not be able to enjoy the great works of art they see today when they come to VMFA.
Thank you. There are two questions asking, would it be better to provide pay increases instead of hiring another senior level position, I guess in reference to, I'll just let you answer.
Hey, you know what? It's not an either or question for us. We put together our priorities. Pay increases are very important, but you also have to remember that as a state agency, our pay increases are dictated by the governor and the budget of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We do equity changes, and I have to applaud Kimberly and Tia and all of our colleagues over in HR, because in addition to the pay increases that people have received as part of the Commonwealth prescribed, we go in annually to make adjustments where the pays scale is inequitable. We get new information from the outside regularly, and we look at how that all fits together. So it's very important, but they are not mutually exclusive. And so when we add positions, it's not ever to the exclusion of a pay increase.
Thank you. This one might be back to you, Michael. If we purchase 200 new Native American works, why is their exhibition space so small and crowded when there are so many galleries dedicated just to white people?
I agree. The question here is we need more space. The galleries for Native American art are inadequate. The collection has grown exponentially since 2015. So the museum does have an expansion plan. We are awaiting the funding from the state, and a decision will be made on that in August or September. We're feeling very good about it. And what that will do is it will allow for a number of gallery changes to happen. So we envision that the Native American collection will go to the gallery currently occupied by 21st century art. It's a much larger space, it's a more prominent space, and it's a far more appropriate space for what we have. 21st century art will move into the new expansion, which will be an add-on into the sculpture garden off of the Mellon Way. We can't wait for this to happen. It's very much needed. And as I said, the plans are in place. We need much better galleries for those collections.
And we've been raising money to that end. Everybody, Tom and all of his colleagues have been busy at work, myself and Caprice, our boards. And I'll also note, too, that, we're obviously we had to put the Native American pre-Columbian collections in a very confined space. It wasn't our first choice. It was our only choice, rather than taking them off view. And we made that decision because we know it's important. But a large number of works of art that we're acquiring by Native American artists are living, working artists, and those are actually going to be in contemporary art spaces, or they're in historical American art spaces, in addition to being, the historical material that you see over in the Evans Court. So there's going to be an exponential increase in the ability to show more works by Native Americans than ever before. And that's the exciting thing about this expansion project. And African art, too, by the way, is going to receive a lot more space than ever before, because if we have a fabulous collection and the ability to grow it more, and it needs to be the most prominent space, and nothing's going to be more prominent than this new wing.
I know we touched on this a little, but just to make sure all the questions get read out, I heard about 30 associates that were fired and that they were previously on an HR Zoom call to cover grievances. How can we know they weren't fired because of raising these issues?
That's easy. And I saw a couple of comments to this effect too when I was reading the questions. We did it on a seniority basis. Several people asked the question, well, I know of people that have worked here since 2014. Well, I'm sorry, seniority ends when you leave the museum. So in the case of an employee who was here from 2014 to 2018 or 19, they left the museum and were gone. They were unemployed. Your tenure starts again. That's standard practice in the world of employment. So no, we did not let anyone go with 2 years of experience or more. That is continuous experience. So it was done purely and not aimed at individuals. That was the fairest way we could possibly do it. And it was one that our general counsel approved as being the only equitable way to do it, so that it was absolutely aligned.
Alex, may I also add that it also sounds like there's an assumption that I didn't believe them, right? There was some things there that, as Alex indicated, we can do better and be better. So I appreciated their time. We were on call for 2 hours, and I actually followed up, I believe it was that same evening or that very next morning, with key takeaways that we're going to be working on. And actually, I'm going to be working with the group to go over those key takeaways. Bridget and I are scheduling one-on-one meetings with gallery associates and to talk about those concerns that they have. They still need to be addressed. And they had a lot to say. And I think they expressed that connection. They felt that there was no connection to other departments. So there was a lot of very key items there so why would I think they were under assumption that I wasn't sympathetic or didn't believe them, but I did. And I took it very seriously. And that's part of the core of how we continue even these diversity and inclusivity conversations, and also making sure that our workforce understands the state's policies and practices in addition to the civility policies. Because this also goes back to how we talk to each other and how we collaborate. How do we interact with each other when we have crucial conversations or confrontations? And what are the takeaways? So what's next? How do we move forward and identify a path forward? So I appreciated their time.
And we're going to continue to have these forums like this and the ones that, like the one that Kimberly just described with our associates. And, it's incumbent upon all of the managers to sit down and listen to employees. But I encourage people to speak up. I mean, the more you speak up and the more we hear about issues or complaints or worries, the more we can deal with it. And we want to be better. As I keep saying, we're not perfect. We can't be perfect. We try, and we're going to try to be perfect, but we're going to try to be better. And that's the commitment I can promise you.
Will the Robinson House be open for its normal hours as well on July 1st?
I believe so. Yes, we're all open. Yeah. In fact, they had the Robinson House was open yesterday when I walked in. I mean, the door was open. So I believe there was a security associate there.
Good question.
Mm-hmm. Excellent question.
With all the instances of police brutality and the backlash to police departments are faced nationwide, why would staff being former police make staff with a public feel safer?
Well, we're getting into a societal issue that there is no good answer. But let me just say this. First of all, yes, is police brutality, murders by police officers a reality, particularly towards black men as a singular target? It's real. It's been real forever. And it's a problem that has to be dealt with by the laws in our cities, our states, and by the federal government. And, right now the federal government is sitting on their hands because the Senate refuses to make the kinds of changes that would make America safer for everyone, particularly for black Americans and particularly black men. Now, having said that, let's also be honest with ourselves. The vast majority of police officers, the men and women who protect us, the men and women who respond to our accidents, the men and women who respond to if you have a home invasion, 99.99% of all of the police officers out there are doing their job to protect us and make us safe. And I'll say this about our colleagues. The 37 officers that we have, I believe in them. So why wouldn't we trust them? They go through the right amount of training, the right amount of screening to be even hired, and the right amount of supervision. John's a great chief. He understands how to make the force be the most effective force it can be, to protect us all, to protect the buildings, to protect the collections. The old adage of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, there are real systemic issues of racism within the police force across the country, right here in our community. But there are systemic racist issues everywhere. And just on the notion of racism, I will say that, ye who cast the first stone needs to be careful. I'm going to admit to you that I'm a racist. I'm also going to tell you that all of you are racist. Everybody on this call, everybody who's an adult that is no longer in the age of innocence, it's unavoidable, it's inescapable. The difference for us here, and all of us, myself included, is how we deal with it. How, with our knee-jerk reaction, we see a picture or we hear something on the news, how do we react to it? And if the primal racist reaction is the one that starts creeping up first, you got to shove it back down, close the door, and lock it back in. Because we unfortunately, consciously and subconsciously are trained. It's human nature, unfortunately, to be tribal. So we have to have an us against them. The white and black issue isn't necessarily based on the color of one's skin by any imagination. It's about perceived cultural differences. Look at the poor guy in New York who was birding with his binoculars and encountered a white woman walking her dog out on a leash, not obeying the law. And who was the person making the phone call? The woman who was breaking the law. We got real issues in this country, but let's not pin it all on the police. Everybody's guilty. We all have to do our part. And quite frankly, if it is a police officer who's who's doing an atrocity, the fellow officers, where there are no rules right now to encourage that, they have to change. We should do our part. Don't let anything go unreported. And that's everything here at the museum, too. If there are issues,
have a vision of cleaning up our Richmond area of all the graffiti with the artists, such as murals of racism. How can we as an agency help make our city beautiful with art?
We don't have an answer to that question because we know, but we do know that we will get called on. I had a conversation with the mayor last week. They have so many issues with the monuments themselves, obviously with policing and so many things. The monuments and the pedestals and all of the epitaphs written on the pedestals are a very large problem, and they have yet to deal with it, but they will be, and we will be easily part of the conversation. People look to us for what we've done to change that conversation by the installation of the Kahindi Wiley sculpture. That work of art, which changes the dynamic of who gets to be on a pedestal, who gets to be on top of a horse. Boy, yeah, I mean, in some way, all those people who are accusing me in the museum of instigating all of the change on Monument Avenue, in some way, they're probably right. We have been responsible, but we're doing it because we're promoting works of art. We're promoting a mindset, in this case, that Kahindi Wiley, the artist, brought to us as an idea. We loved it. We commissioned him to do it because we think it's an important statement in the 21st century. Should have been made 4 centuries ago or before that. Because, this country, black Americans have suffered atrocities since 1619 when the first enslaved Africans came off of the boats in Jamestown. It hasn't stopped. And it's just changed its form in some cases. And again, yes, in some cases, obviously, police violence and murder. We can do our part as an art museum, so, we will weigh in on the issues of what to do to rethink Monument Avenue. And we've got some ideas individually and collectively. And we will certainly, as Virginia's Art Museum, try to help in that regard, too.
Michael G., can we revisit the issue of food waste at some point? I know there's a liability issue, but why can't we work to change this?
Sure. As Kimberly mentioned earlier, we're both new to this area, but we've been having conversations about one of the key, reasons that we have some of the food waste, which is one of the large refrigeration units, and we're actively looking to get the funds to change that, hopefully within, this next month. So I'm hoping that will be a solution for some of that. And yes, there are legalities and protocols and regulations about some of the other food waste when it goes out to the public. But we're going to start with this one, and it's going to be a first step.
Thank you. Follow-up to that, why can't we donate food waste to organizations like Panera that could help?
I don't have an answer to that one right now, but if someone else would like to jump in.
Yeah, I know that there are certain procedures being a state agency, but Michael and I will continue to check into that because that was one of the first things he and I talked about was the amount of food waste. It's just unbelievable to me. And so we just have to dig in more. Everyone will be patient with us as we're learning these new businesses and what I would call the intricacies and how we can have a better business model. And that's one that we've identified for so many reasons, even from sustainability, et cetera.
We have touched on this, but just to reiterate, why haven't there been any preventative efforts to stop harassment, such as anti-racist training?
There have been anti-racist training. I mean, it depends on from our. Are they speaking specifically about the police force or just everybody?
Just read it straight.
We've had sexual harassment training. We had Chris Grab that came out and did a ton of seminars. I don't know if everyone remembers that. I mean, in fact, we had conversations with him again, and we were hoping that he would be out in April for this year because I try to get him at least once a year. He's the director of that whole area for employee relations and grievances, And so we try to partner with our state partners for those types of very, very sensitive training. And he did a ton of training for us. So we're looking for him to come back as well and other webinars based around that.
Yeah, let me go back to my comment too about racism. You know, what I'm talking about, just to be clear, is about bias, and you know, bias is the underlayment of racism. You know, I'm not accusing any of you, by the way, of being racist in the sense of, you know, doing racial epithets, being members of the Klan. I'm talking about the inherent bias that we learn and grow up with, and we see and we absorb consciously and subconsciously. And the kinds of things that Kimberly is talking about, where we can have training to make us aware of our biases so that we can deal with them and not let them control our lives. That's what that's really about. You know, it's the path to racism that you have to stop with your bias. And your biases, because there's probably not just one. You know, you may have multiple. I know I do. And there are things that we just absorb by being human beings and living. So trust me when I say that we're there and committed to helping us all be better people, because being better people is going to give us a better society, and one where we can deal with inherent racism and all the things that trouble our society today, and try to make that better for the generation that we live in, but also our children and our grandchildren and beyond.
And this Chief Diversity Officer will also help us develop these programs as well, because it's not just what I'll call that one and done. We have to, it's just something that is becomes the fabric of the institution in having these types of programs. And having someone dedicated to that will be phenomenal.
Great. We have kind of a general question, but I'll put it to you. What is your response to the 750 comments on your Instagram account that were not anonymous and came from the Richmond community?
I'm sorry, you were posing it.
I'm sure I understand the question, yeah.
And I don't know if they're asking if we would respond publicly to them, which I believe we've already stated.
Yeah, we're not reaching out. I think Jan also has expressed that as well.
And I have to say that most of the things that were, I mean, a number of things in that Instagram account were not true. And I think we've dealt with most of those in terms of providing good facts and solid information. A lot of those were repeated in the VMFA reform document. And again, I think we've been pretty clear about what the truth is, and we stand behind that. It's, you know, we've done a lot of good things. We're doing more. We have more to do. There were issues in there that we clearly understand, and we stand behind all the things that we've talked about. But again, when it comes to social media, no good deed goes unpunished. We did post a response after the first wave of the Instagram comments, and we were vilified. You know, people, you can't deal with folks. And by the way, when you say, when whoever's asked the question, you know, people in the community identified, in social media, you can create any personality you want. And I'll guarantee you, based on the research that we did with the consultants that we brought in, of the 700 and something folks that commented, when you take out the repeat comments by people, but then you take out the number of people that actually created additional personalities and just repeated the same commentary, it wasn't that much. Regardless, you can't go there. We won't go there. We would much rather have open forums like this, answer questions for people, and give them the honest, straightforward answer, and solve problems. You know, answering questions is one thing, but we can stand on our record with pride and dignity, and we can also stand on the hope and progress that we plan to make and are making, because it's material. And it's so many of the things and most of the things in the VMFA reform document, and for that matter, in the document that, or in the Instagram account as well. Because some of those things were just not correct.
And I believe that was
Well, let me say too. I want to thank everybody who has stayed online to ask questions. Everybody who's asked questions. Everybody who's provided answers. I especially want to thank Kimberly and the HR folks, but especially the Be Well folks, because remember, this all started out as how are we going to open safely? How are we going to be back in business on July 1 as the best art museum in America? And we are there because of all of you, and the Be Well leadership who's on this call have done a phenomenal job. Nicole, you've been a great spokesperson to ask all the questions. That's a tough job to be able to do, but I applaud everybody on the call for everything you're doing to be able to allow us to fulfill our mission and the strategic plans that we set up. So thanks to everybody